All right, welcome back to the channel, guys. Let's talk about the Umbrella Academy Season 3. I think we can all agree that the first two seasons of Umbrella Academy are pretty excellent. I think either season you can make a really strong, compelling case that that is the best season of the show. I think what we can also all agree on is that Season 3 is a massive drop in quality from those first two seasons.
Let's kill this thing. It's slow.
What on earth happened between seasons? Now, this reeks of like post-COVID studio approach, all right? Like, let me just get into a very quick rant about what happened with COVID. Initially, we had a bunch of shows coming out that were impacted and affected by COVID. This resulted in like really clunky CGI, really strange writing, some seasons of some really good shows that just felt a bit off. And we all excused it, right? We all went, oh, it's because of COVID. It's because of COVID restrictions, limitations. People had to zoom in and they had to do it all on like a backlot and green screen. But my theory is that what happened is studios saw what they could get away with during COVID in terms of like putting everything on green screen with no practical sets, not having like really good extras. And they've continued to cut those corners even though they don't need to anymore because COVID is kind of over, right? So even though they don't need to, they continue to cut these corners just to like line their pockets. And it really rubs me the wrong way. We saw this in Bridgerton season 3, right? That came out after COVID, yet all the sets felt really empty. It didn't feel like this living, breathing world we used to get to in Bridgerton. And this happens in Umbrella Academy season 3 as well. And I really don't like it. In my opinion, if you can't make the show to the same quality, wait, but don't deliver us a subpar product. And I do know that this season is a bottle season. Like, I do understand that, and I really like the idea that it's entirely set in the Hotel Oblivion. My issue is that the effects are awful. The shot composition is disastrous. There are so many shots in this season, so many conversations where yet again, it's like this weird Netflix approach where all the shots are from like under their chin, like eye lines are never meeting. Like, you'll be watching a conversation between, say, like Luther and Allison towards the back end of season 3, and like Luther will be looking down, Allison will be looking up, and like natural like shot composition would like frame it that way, right? But for some reason it'll be all over the place. It's like fish-eyed and confusing, and you're just constantly disoriented. Like, scenes are shot as if they are dream sequences when they are not dream sequences. On top of that, the writing is really bizarre this season. There is this thing that's set up in like the first episode, right, called a Kugelblitz. And the way they talk about the Kugelblitz, first off, not one character goes, hey, what's a Kugelblitz? Now, I did kind of infer from the writing that the Kugelblitz is like a real thing. And when I say it's a real thing, I actually Googled this. Turns out it isn't like a real thing. Like, scientists have never seen an actual Kugelblitz. It's a theory. It's an established scientific theory of this thing that like sucks everything into its orbit or whatever, right? And so my issue is like, I understand maybe Five knowing what a Kugelblitz is and some of the really like smart sciencey people knowing what a Kugelblitz is, but it makes no sense to me that someone like Victor, Diego, or Klaus wouldn't at least question what a Kugelblitz is, what it means. Like, everyone just goes, oh yeah, it's the Kugelblitz in the basement that we need to stop. Okay. On top of that, the Kugelblitz will like literally like explode, right? Like, it'll set off a massive energy beam and like pick off a bunch of random people, a bunch of cities, a bunch of buildings. Like, it'll start slowly demolishing the entire planet. And I know that the Umbrella Academy, like, I know that the point of the Umbrella Academy is that they stop apocalypses, right? Like, I know that they're used to it at this point, but like, not once are any of the characters like, oh shit, like the world is actually falling apart around us. People are dying. The Kugelblitz is getting closer. Like, members of the Sparrow Academy, which are a major part of this season, they are major players, just disappear. And there's just never any scenes where someone's like, shit, guys, like, the Kugelblitz is getting really close. Like, we're losing people. Like, my family's gone. Like, do none of these people have friends or lovers or, like, anyone that they care about? The only kind of character that they really explore being, like, sucked up by the Kugelblitz is Marcus. And that's kind of a plot device to get the Sparrow Academy and the Umbrella Academy arguing, because the Sparrow Academy accuses the Umbrella Academy of offing Marcus. But it's like, when it's revealed that this Kugelblitz is sucking up all these people, like, just no one seems particularly phased. And it bugged me throughout the entire season. Like, there's just no kind of like desperation or energy. And you can say it's because they know they're going to stop it, or they're just desensitized. But there's also like no world building this season. I think that's the bigger point I'm trying to get to, is there's no news reports of like, oh my God, like there are random explosions going off that are like wiping out civilians. So as a result, what I felt like was going on, like I genuinely felt like what the plot was going for was that they're in limbo. They're in this like alternate pocket dimension or something, and they're being like eternally punished. Like for a good chunk of the season initially, I literally thought it was going to operate like American Horror Story Murder House, where they're like tied to this hotel. Like if they try and escape the hotel, it like loops them back inside the hotel. They can't actually leave to a greater world because the greater world doesn't exist. It's an illusion. This is actually what the Hotel Oblivion was in the graphic novel. In the graphic novel, the Hotel Oblivion was set up for the villains of the Umbrella Academy as like eternal damnation and punishment, where they live the same day over and over, and the walls are endless. We start to see the Hotel Oblivion in the show become that towards the end. But what I thought was like, oh, they're just not on planet Earth, and that's why everything feels really ethereal and strange. But then Harlan's introduced. Harlan is part of the living, breathing world outside and enters the world. On top of that, there's another scene where Hargraves, the dad, takes Klaus out to like basically train him to be immortal, and gets hit by a bunch of cars. None of the cars stop. Like, not one car stops and checks on Klaus. They just keep driving like NPCs. So as a result, the world the Umbrella Academy inhabit, and the point I'm trying to get to, doesn't feel real. It does not feel real. There is not one news report. There's not one newspaper. There's not one screaming civilian. There's not one threat of like the apocalypse. Like in season 1, when the moon exploded, you saw the impact it had on the greater world. And as a result, I'm just sitting there the whole season being like, what are the Umbrella Academy fighting for? Because they don't really seem to care about the world. They only seem to care about each other. They don't even seem to really care about the Sparrow Cat. It was just so strange to me. It was a really, really bizarre season. And it's like, if you want us to care about the stakes, at least show us a little bit of the stakes. It started to feel like the show could only afford its lead actors and just wanted to avoid any extras as much as they could at any point possible. The only time we really see characters outside of the Umbrella or the Sparrow Academy is when like Five goes to find the alternate version of Pogo, and Pogo's in like a motorcycle bar. We see some extras briefly there, and also the montage of Harlan wiping out all their parents and creating the paradox, accidentally creating the Kugelblitz. Also, I think this season is kind of pushing how strange the show can be. Now, I know the graphic novel is weird, all right? It's strange. You know, in the first graphic novel, Victor turns into an actual wide-bodied violin, all right? Like, there is weird stuff in this graphic novel and in this show before, but I feel like in season 3, they are really it just feels like they're trying to be weird for weird's sake. Like, the Cube character of the Sparrow Academy, it didn't get a laugh. Of course, I wasn't invested. There are a few moments and scenes in this season where I'm like, I love how weird this show is normally, but it just started to feel like the writers were trying to test the waters of what they could get away with for no other reason than just because they can. For example, the samurai that show up at the end of the Hotel Oblivion just feels like a choice like that. It literally reminds me of Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch, where it's just like, you know, a writer sitting there going, what else is cool? What else do I like? What else do I have Funko Pops of in my room? I don't know, samurais, that would be cool. Like It just didn't work for me. And the reason it didn't work for me is the show has a very sort of steampunk aesthetic, this sort of gothic, Black Parade, Tim Burton, steampunky Bioshock feel. It's got this timeless quality to it. So even though there are aliens, they feel like Lovecraft aliens. And even though there is future technology, it feels like future technology the way Fallout showed future technology. It's a really interesting way that they like weave in these concepts where it all feels really cohesive despite it coming from different worlds of like fantasy and science fiction and like horror, you know? And the reason the samurais bugged me is that it just doesn't really mesh with the rest of the world. It's the same thing with the sort of cube. The cube feels like the Tesseract from the MCU. It's just, it just the elements really didn't sort of gel for me this season. And it felt like, yeah, they were really trying to just stretch the limits of how strange they could be. You know, I can buy Pogo because it feels like a sort of extension of our real world. You know, the whole point of the Umbrella Academy's world, especially in the graphic novels, is that aliens came here earlier, right? You know, Reginald Hargraves is an alien who came years ago and started like pushing human technology past what we achieved in the real world. So in the graphic novel, there are jetpacks, people fly around. There are multiple intelligent chimps like Pogo, not just Pogo. And it sets up this world where it's like our world, but with these really interesting futuristic alien developments and technology. And the samurai is just, what is it? You know, what is it? It's just these weird giant zombies controlled by cockroaches. Like, okay. Also, as much as I love Lila, what on earth was with the subplot between Lila, Diego, and that like adoptive child, the actor from Euphoria season 1 and 2? What on earth was the deal with that? Absolutely went nowhere. And he's another character that the Kugelblitz just eats up. And they're just kind of like, oh, okay. You know, like no emotional reactions. It was just such a frustrating season for me. And the hardest thing here is I know I've been bitching, but there's some really good stuff this season. First off, I didn't like Sissy and Harlan that much in season 2. The montage we get this season of Sissy Harlan set to House of the Rising Sun is breathtaking. That montage and just the way it sets up this extra world, you know, that's what I needed more of this season. The way it sets up, like, here's the impact that Victor had on Sissy and Harlan, and how cruel it was that Victor then flashed forward to the future and they were left to deal with the mess. Super interesting. I absolutely love that Sissy and Victor had to go on the run. You see this really compelling montage. I could have watched a whole episode of that. And I didn't even like Sissy and Harlan in season 2, but super interesting. On top of that, like the way it ends too with the montage to another version of House of the Rising Sun, and it's Harlan blowing up like all the mums. And also another thing I like, this is the hottest take of my video, I liked Allison this season. I thought they set up Allison's turn to villainy actually quite well in the first 2 seasons. And I know she's very unlikable. She's very mean and cruel, but I think the conflicts it brings up here is really quite fascinating and leads to, in my opinion, the most well-written scene of the season, which is when Victor and Allison like really butt heads in front of the whole group, start calling each other out, and Allison calls out Victor for basically hogging the attention of the group despite all the awful things that Victor has done. Super fascinating. We'll get into that character interaction later when I get into my character by character breakdown. But yeah, some really interesting stuff. 5 is as good as ever this season. I absolutely love the sequence where 5 goes and hangs out with the alternate version of Pogo. Also, the alternate versions of Reginald Hargraves and Pogo we get are super fascinating, and it's really interesting to see parts of the other Daddy Hargraves come into this version of Daddy Hargraves. And it's also really interesting, like, it makes me question, why did Pogo in this reality have the balls to leave Reginald Hargraves due to how he treats the children, but not in the original reality that we followed? Super, super fascinating, and really opens up some interesting angles to the time travel plot that the Umbrella Academy is following. Also, Klaus is excellent this season. I love the evolution of Klaus, the fact that he is now immortal. It feels like the show is growing and moving. Also, I thought Victor's transition was handled really well, going from Vanya to Victor. It makes total sense to me that all the characters would just be like, yeah, okay, you do you. Like, we're too busy trying to stop an apocalypse. Like, I found it actually really telling of a lot of the characters, how their initial reactions were. And I thought the character work they did for Luther was really kind of like well done this season and strengthened by his interactions with Victor. And I thought Victor's conflict with Allison was really good. I thought this was the best Victor has been throughout all 3 seasons, and I thought it was really fitting that this is the best version of Victor we see. But yeah, all in all, the plot just went in circles at points. I did think it was trying to be too weird. I thought the first episode of season 3 was a massive drop in quality. The first episode, the plot really doesn't move for a while, and it stays really stuck in one place. And like literally the entire first episode, it has a dance sequence. It's the Sparrow Academy and the Umbrella Academy meeting. And then they have a fight scene that goes for like honestly, it feels like 20 minutes. Like they'll be fighting and we learn some of their powers and then it cuts down to the Kugelblitz through like the air vents and then it comes back up the air vent and new characters are fighting. We learn their powers and then it goes down the air vent. And if it sounds repetitive, if you're getting annoyed at me listening to this, imagine watch the episode again. Watch the episode again, because it's the dance sequence and then it's this long ass fight sequence that just isn't that compelling to watch. It is interesting to learn the new characters' powers, but I just thought it goes really long. It doesn't push the plot forward. And honestly, minus 1 or 2 scenes, it feels like you can actually skip this episode entirely. If I was going to rewatch this show, I would be really tempted to skip it, because I just think the pacing of this first episode really sets off the Umbrella Academy Season 3 on the wrong foot. Also, I think the idea of the Sparrow Academy is great on paper. I think it's a really good idea, but my God, like, aside from Sloane and Ben, which are very conveniently ignored by the Kugelblitz, like, what the fuck is that about? Can I just say, like, such convenient writing that the Kugelblitz will literally wipe out everyone except the Umbrella Academy. Now, yes, maybe it didn't wipe out the Umbrella Academy because they have that energy in them and they're the only ones that can save it and they're built into the kill switch. I can buy that. But the fact that it kills off every single member of the Sparrow Academy, except the ones that the Umbrella Academy find really important and are in love with. Like, why does it keep Ben around other than we know who Ben is and we like seeing a different version of Ben? Like, can you imagine how effective it would have been if Sloane or Ben got wiped out and we got left with, like, maybe the guy that, like, absorbs injuries and gets disfigured, or, like, someone we didn't particularly like and they need to, like, work together? Also, there are so many, like, revelations this season. Like, Reginald kills Luther with, like, an alien sword tentacle thing. And, like, people see this and not one person goes like, oh, it turns out Dad was an alien. Like, I don't expect them to have, like, a mental breakdown or a psychotic episode because of it. But, like, no one finds that even, like, remotely strange. Like, it's just, there's so much stuff this season where, like, things happen and it's like, oh, I was really excited for that thing to happen and it's happened, but, like, okay. But yeah, circling back to the Sparrow Academy, just such wasted potential. Like, we had 8 new characters that could have been really interesting. And I think the show is capable. I think the writers are capable of actually pulling off 8 new characters and making them feel substantial. Because I remember, like, 2 episodes in to season 1 of Umbrella Academy, I pretty much cared about every single character. I was intrigued, I was excited, and I really wanted to have, like, that feeling again with the Sparrow Academy. But most of them I can't even name to you. Like, they don't impact the plot at all. We get a couple good fight scenes with them, but, like, I don't get it. Like, they introduced Lila as a new character. They introduced the commission lady. You know, they introduced Hazel and Chacha. These are all really well-written, well-realized new characters outside of our core group. And the Sparrow Academy, they just suck. And you know what? I don't even like the alternate version of Ben that much. I think it's a bit played out and a bit weird and, like, kind of frustrating that we've had all these different versions of Ben. Now, I found with Ben, the show kind of wants to have its cake and eat it too. It's like, why is there an alternate version of Ben, but not an alternate version of any of the other characters? It's just like, you just want Ben around, even though you killed off Ben last season. You know, it just feels a bit frustrating and a bit like, oh, we always need our core set of characters, despite how clunky the writing might feel. And that's another thing. Like, at this point, you need to start committing to some deaths of some lead characters. It is so exhausting to watch multiple characters die, watch Luther die, only to have them brought back yet again. And the only way, in my opinion, this can be redeemed is if the answer to properly stopping the apocalypse is the Umbrella Academy needs to die. I do really think that's where the show is going, and I'm praying that this is where the show goes, because I think it will make the repetitive feeling of the first 3 seasons way more impactful and way more forgivable if the final point is their energy will always somehow bring on the apocalypse, or their existence in our world will always destroy it, and they need to wipe themselves out to let humanity live and exist. I think that's a really tragic, earth-shattering, sad conclusion and makes the whole show powerful. If it isn't that, I think the show needs to stop killing characters just to bring them back, because it just isn't that exciting, and it's giving MCU multiverse where you just stop caring about character deaths. Now, in saying all this though, I think season 4 looks excellent.
It's time to face the inevitable.
I I think season 4 is fixing a lot of the issues I had with season 3, judging by the trailer. It makes Ben look really interesting and looks like it's going to give a reason for the fact that Ben is so important to always have around. He is this existential threat. Really, really fascinating.
Any one of you remember how Ben actually died?
Ben died because we failed as a team.
And what?
And I really like that it feels like this is actually a final conclusion. And I'm hoping that even though each season feels like it didn't really matter because there's a new timeline or a new whatever, I'm really hoping that season 4 reins it all in and there is a final devastating conclusion that really kind of feels existential, tragic, and haunting. Now, it's not all bad. There are a lot of things I like. I'm just being picky because I love this show so much. So I think in order to get into all the good things and all the bad things I liked about this season, we are going to do another character by character breakdown because there are a lot of good things despite all these complaints I have. These are just the issues that stop me from completely loving this show. Now let's get into our character by character breakdown. All right, first off, Luther Hargraves. This is the best Luther has been this season. They finally commit to him just being a goofball. Now, I do appreciate in season 1, I know I'm in the minority of this, I appreciate that Luther was a hard ass towards Victor in season 1. He was the only one that really took Victor as a serious threat seriously, and I appreciate that. But my issue with Luther has always been they can't really decide if he's meant to be a lovable goofball or a really serious, tragic, what could have been sort of character. And I like that they kind of gave up on taking him seriously. In season 3, he's just a big goofball and a lot of his humor really lands for me. I even like the implication that because he's been on space, he's a bit virginal, like he doesn't know his way around like having a healthy sex life, having a healthy romantic relationship. And I find all that stuff really interesting and like really informs his character and why he is the way he is. I really liked his relationship with Sloane and the fact that he was killed by his dad, still having some faith in his dad was really fitting and really tragic, and I just wish they committed to his death. I think it's such a shame, and we all knew they weren't going to commit to his death. The way it was like framed and the way it was done, it just felt so rushed and quick, but like I really liked that scene overall when it was happening, and I'm really sad that they double backed on it with the ending of this season. But yeah, really liked Luther this season. All right, let's talk about Diego Hargraves. I really like what they did with Diego in season 2. I do not really like what they did with Diego in season 3. I think for the most part, he didn't really have too much interesting stuff going on. I did like him kind of like leaning into becoming a dad, becoming more like paternal, really caring about Lila and her well-being. I thought all that stuff was really interesting and good for his character. It just felt a bit too, like kind of too little too late, a bit rushed. I thought the season as a whole was kind of really lacking with Diego development. And when we did get him, it was just a bit undercooked and a bit underwritten. But I thought towards the end of the season, he definitely got a bit more interesting. We never really got to see how he felt about the fact that Lila lied to him about the kid being his and like the impact that had on him. It's very quickly rushed away. And there isn't too much explored when that like adoptive kid gets like sucked away by the Kugelblitz. He doesn't seem too fazed by it. There's just a lot of missing stuff with Diego that I really wish they spent more time on. I really liked him in season 2. It's just so disappointing that he just feels so underdeveloped here. Again, I really liked his relationship with Lila towards the end of the season, but that's honestly about it. Next, we have Allison. I know. This is a bad take. Like, I know everyone is going to disagree with me. I liked Allison this season. Do I think she was perfect? No. Did I get where she was coming from? Yes. Do I think this is the most interesting and complex and fascinating stuff in this season as a whole? Absolutely. The fight she has with Victor is so good. The headbutting they have throughout the season is so fascinating, and there's almost this really interesting angle that they don't go for, but almost feels implicit, where Allison is complaining to the group that Victor constantly takes away attention from them, and the group is constantly fixing Victor's messes and bending over backwards for Victor and constantly getting fucked up and thrown off by Victor. And she doesn't go for the low blow there. She doesn't start bullying Victor for the transition, even though given how hateful she is, it almost feels like that's where the scene's going. And I think it's really good character writing that it kind of feels like that's coming, even though it doesn't. It feels like there's an element there where Allison is almost resentful of just Victor being happy, Victor stepping into who Victor really is. And it seems like Allison is almost perturbed because it's like, how come you get to be happy and live your full self and be your true self when everything I love is taken away from me? For those of you who think it's rushed, I don't really get what show you've been watching. I totally get why Allison would be bothered. Allison had a life she liked the first time in the first apocalypse that Victor caused and exploded the moon and wiped out. Then Allison got used to her new life and that got sucked away from her. Meanwhile, Victor gets to, keep Harlan around and step into their true identity. I'm not saying it's justified or fair or even rational, but I get where it's coming from. Like, I get why Allison feels jibbed. And on top of that, even if you don't like who it's coming from, the points that Allison makes at certain points are valid. The points that Allison makes to Victor about, hey, like, you killed Pogo and we never exiled you. You blew up the earth and we still care about you. Yada, 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 was really interesting. Like, I was with her on that. And I totally get why Allison wanted to kill Harlan. Like, it makes sense. All right, now, yes, you can explore the angle that maybe Allison only killed Harlan because she doesn't want Victor to be happy. That is super fascinating. I think that's a totally valid interpretation. And that's why I find Allison's character so interesting this season. Because in my opinion, totally fair that Allison wiped out Harlan. Harlan was a massive threat, a nuclear level threat that was going to explode and self-destruct. And Allison dealt with that and handled that. Meanwhile, Victor was exacerbating the problem and hiding it from the rest of the group. Totally fair from Allison, but the issue is the intention and the emotional intention behind it does feel like it might just be Allison got really wanted to hurt Victor and take something away from Victor that was linked to Sissy the way that things have been taken away from Allison. And I think the fact that like Allison is logically justified but morally not justified is a master stroke of writing, and I think what we needed more of this season. I know Allison is complicated and nasty and like holds on to grudges as this season goes on and just gets really cruel, really bitter and really vindictive. But I can't cite it as a flaw with the show. I know that people really like to see themselves in every single character in the Umbrella Academy. And for some people who saw themselves in Allison, it's really disappointing to watch a character you love do shitty things. But like, I think it's great writing. I think the scene where they're debating killing Harlan, I remember really frustrated me, and I might need to rewatch this scene again so I can fully wrap my head around it. But I remember being bothered because it makes sense that Victor doesn't want to kill Harlan, especially because Victor would see themselves in Harlan, right? Like Victor was the apocalyptic threat at one point. So of course they don't want Harlan being hurt the way Victor could have been hurt, right? Totally get that. Totally fair enough. But I think the fact that some of the group were willing to kill Harlan kind of bugged me because I'm like, yeah, that's the approach you should have had with Victor too. And no one really points that out, that they have this like family bias. And yeah, I wish they just explored that angle of like family bias and like inconsistency in logic when it comes to apocalyptic threats. All right, next we have Klaus. What an exceptionally just good character. I love the montage of him getting hit by cars. I loved him like leveling up and learning more about his powers. I love how important to the plot Klaus is, even though he could have just been dumb comedic relief. He's really layered and nuanced and interesting, and Robert Sheehan is excellent as Klaus. I also love that this version of Klaus is what really gets us insight into what makes Reginald Hargraves tick, this alternate version of Reginald. I love kind of the tension that is between these two of, is Reginald going to hurt Klaus? I love that it ends with Reginald hurting Klaus. I just think everything about Klaus this season is excellent and probably some of the best stuff in this season, along with Allison, which again, I know is a hot take. Next, we have 5. Yet again, a phenomenal character, just in his very concept, just super fascinating. Like, I've got the graphic novels right here. Like, look how sick this cover is. This isn't even what he looks like in the graphic novel, but like, I just love that he is this schoolboy. And he's young, but he's smart and he can fight. We get great action scenes with 5 this season. We always get great action scenes with 5. I just think the show knows how to use 5 really well, and this is no exception. I love him going on his little solo quest and being the alternate version of Pogo. Everything with 5 is always so good, and he always maintains the momentum of the show. He's always the driving force, trying to like stop things, prevent things, change things, and is always this like knowing character. And I just think it's exceptional character writing. I love that they stay consistent with the fact that like emotionally Five is very consistent and kind of blocks everything else out. I love the quiet moments he has with Reginald towards the end of the season where they're like watching the apocalypse, watching the world end on that final little piece of floating rock. Really good stuff. Next, we have Ben Hargreaves. I did not like what they did with Ben this season. They had a really interesting idea there with an alternate version of Ben, but he was just annoying, and it was kind of frustrating because we're not really learning anything about Ben that we care about. This is a different version of Ben, and I think plot-wise, it just felt really contrived to me. And it's kind of getting frustrating with the show that like all these like conveniences exist just so we can always have our core group of characters. It's really interesting that we had Ben as like a ghost, as like a seance for a while, and then he like vanishes, right? And that felt, even though he was never like tangible, we could never like see him, none of the other characters ever could, it felt like a tangible loss and death in the show, like him finally exiting into the afterlife. And so then to bring him back in this alternate version, it's like we don't have any alternate versions of the other characters, so why give us this one? Like, it was just annoying and a bit contrived. Again, this might be fixed with season 4 because it looks like season 4 is suggesting that everything hinges on Ben being dead, like maybe he is a threat, whatever. That could be really interesting, but as it stands, what we've seen of the first 3 seasons, I just didn't really like Ben. I didn't connect with him, and I didn't really know what we were meant to get from him emotionally, and it just frustrated me that he stuck around the whole season despite really not contributing much. Didn't like him. The actor's great, and it's a good job that he feels distinctly different to the other Ben. But yeah, it just felt like the show was having its cake and eating it too, in my opinion. All right, next we have Victor. This is the best Victor has been. Victor is so good this season. I really like Victor. I like their kind of like disposition, just like how they carry themselves. You know, I think he's really interesting. I think his trans plot is really well handled, really fascinating, and it feels like Umbrella Academy's take on that. I think they did a really good job of like bringing it in, but not fucking it up. Like, it didn't feel handholdy or super like preachy or like out of character for the show. It actually felt really in line with the rest of the show. I think they handled it perfectly. I love the little like kind of subtle conflicts it brings up with Allison, but I also like that overall it just feels like this really interesting thing that informs us not only about Victor, but about how the other characters are about Victor and are about themselves. I think it says a lot about these different characters, how they kind of like take it on initially and how they move through it with him. It's really well done. On top of that, I think bringing back Sissy and Harlan was really good for Victor. I think it was a really strong idea, and it made season 2 feel more important. The thing I appreciate about Sissy and Harlan in season 3, it made it feel like season 2 wasn't just this waste of time travel adventure in a different dimension. It actually felt like each season has informed the other season, which I really appreciated. But yeah, just really liked Victor this season overall. I found the scenes didn't drag the way they used to, and I thought the conflict between Victor and Allison was really well done. I also like that Victor was the bigger person throughout that conflict at different points, but when Allison called them out for kind of wrongdoings they've done in the past, it didn't give you easy answers. Victor didn't just like verbally smack down Allison, because sometimes Allison made a good point that Victor couldn't actually refute. I thought it was excellent conflict. I also thought this is the best performance we've got from Victor, and I thought the physical comedy that came with Victor being uncomfortable in different situations was actually really well done too. So yeah, really liked Victor this season. Really liked it. Next, we have Lila. What an excellent new character. I know I said this in season 2, but I just love that Lila is now part of the Umbrella Academy. Like, she is here to stay. She's an important part of the character. I love the fight scene she has with Five when she was in like the bath, and she gets out of the bath, and I think the camera is doing really smart things to avoid showing like any nudity, but it was just a really good, well choreographed fight scene. Now again, it dips into that Umbrella Academy thing of like a lot of fight scenes are not going to end with someone dying or being seriously hurt, but I love that they were like having a conversation throughout it. I think it was really well orchestrated. Probably my favorite fight scene of the season, next to the one with Diego and his adoptive kid and the guy that can like redistribute energy and injuries. I thought that fight scene in the shopping mall was like excellent and really well done. And I wish we got more action like those two scenes. But yeah, Lila is fantastic this season. I love the subplot that she's pregnant. I love the fake out pregnancy and I love the real pregnancy. And I love what we learn about her character. I just think she's excellent. I think she's performed really well too. I think the actress that plays her is great. Love Lila this season. Next, we have Reginald Hargraves. Look, I wish the revelation of him being an alien to the group was better handled, but this is the best Reginald has been. Reginald's fucking awesome this season. I love that it's a different version of Reginald. I love that at certain points we really like him as a character. We feel bad for him. We empathize with him. He's funny. He's caring. His interplay with Klaus is really fucked up at different points. The immortality training is cruel, but also like he wants the best for Klaus in his own twisted way for a while until the twist happens. But even the twist, like again, it's sort of an ends justify the means. With the ending, right? Like, are we meant to have a sinister feeling? He gave Allison what she wanted. He's brought the kids back to life in a sense, but it's like, at what cost? I think the fact that we are always kind of like waiting for the floor to fall out from under us in regards to Reginald is really well done. And I love that it always feels like there's this bigger master plan with him. So even though the ending, it does feel like he did villainous things. He killed Luther. He sent Klaus to like the afterlife, right? Like those are evil things. But then did he do that knowing that the ending of this would be they would all be back to life in this like perfect reality of his? Really fascinating, really interesting. We will need to see how that plays out in season 4. I can see in season 4 that Reginald and the Umbrella Academy are actually working together. And I find that really interesting. But it is important to note, with this version of Reginald, he was evil to the point where Pogo actually jumped ship. He couldn't do it. He left. So I just find it interesting. Is he a nicer version of Reginald? Is his master plan, at the end of the day, a greater good? Or is he just an evil, abusive, nasty piece of shit? We don't know. And I'm really curious to find that out. Now, yes, obviously he's not going to win Parent of the Year, but I think the fact that it's kind of inferred that the Umbrella Academy like have this energy in them and are part of stopping apocalypses and their existence kind of challenges the fabric of the Earth existing. I think this greater good concept is going to have to come into it when we talk about Reginald, when the show is all said and done. Super fascinating character. This is the best he's been. I loved Reginald this season. The highlight of season 3 for me. And I love that he created the hotel. And I love when the hotel started like turning into like this weird, uncanny, like paradoxy messed up thing that like started spitting people back out on different floors, and it reminded me of The Shining. Just really well done. Next we have Sloane. Look, the Sparrow Academy, my general consensus is going to be I wish we just knew more about them. The wedding, the love between Sloane and Luther just felt really rushed, but out of the Sparrow Academy, she is the best character. I feel like I have the best idea about what makes her tick. She's really sweet. Really sweet. Like in terms of this show, there are a lot of characters you like that are funny and sassy. She feels really pure. She feels really sweet. I love that she wasn't like overly sexed up as his love interest. I found how they handled her character and what she represented to Luther like really tasteful. I just thought it was a really well done character. When I look back on it, I think Sloane is easily the standout of the Sparrow Academy. Maybe not power wise, but definitely execution wise. I just can't get past the CGI in that scene where she vaulted off the wall. That was shocking. But aside from that, yeah, really like her character. Does it feel a bit contrived that her and Ben are the only remaining Sparrow Academy members despite the Kugelblitz constantly like sucking the rest away? It does. It feels a bit silly goofy. But aside from that, really liked her character. Next, we have Faye Hargraves. Shit character. Shit character. The show didn't care about her. She gets sucked up by the Kugelblitz. No one seems to care, even mention it. Can't really tell you much about her. Really disappointing character. Really cool power. Disappointing. This represents why I don't really like the Sparrow Academy this season. Next, we have Harlan. This is an example of a character I like as a concept and not as a character. I love the wordless montages we get set to the House of the Rising Sun. His backstory, I love that he wiped out the Umbrella Academy's mums. All really interesting ideas, like really super cool ideas. I love that he is the kind of like linking tissue between season 2 and season 3. I love what he represents to Victor. However, as a character, as a performance, super not interesting, super clunky. Was glad when he left the show, because also I have to mention his fight scenes. I mentioned them in my season 2 video. I fucking hate these scenes where it's just people with vague energy powers sucking another person's energy power. The fight or power transfer, whatever you want to call it, that Victor and Harlan were having, where they're floating in the sky and they're both just sitting there like, is so, I hate them. They're not exciting. It went on for like 10 minutes. Thank God Allison did the bad thing and like broke it up, because it was just so... I do not like these scenes. They're popping up in the MCU more and more. I don't like these, like, oh, the energy level is too high. Oh, my life power is draining. It even happens at the end of this season where all the Umbrella Academy are on the apocalypse, like, kill switch. But at least with that one, you literally see them start to like zombify and die. But I just think visually it looks shit. It's not exciting action. Stop doing it. But yeah, Harlan is a character that I think as a concept is great, as a plot device is great to like move the plot forward. As a character, dull, boring, did not care when he died. Sorry. Next we have Marcus Hargreaves. Sorry, I don't think the show really cared to develop Marcus, so I don't really care to talk about Marcus. He made a good leader, and it was interesting that he was a bit of a hard ass, especially towards Reginald, but aside from that, yeah, like, I mean, he was killed off like straight away. Next we have Alfonso Hargreaves. Now, I don't remember any of these names. I'm just looking at them on the screen. He's the one that can like spit pain back out to other people. What a great idea. Why did we not have him around longer for the season? He has a great fight scene. I don't know what makes him tick. I don't know how he feels about his physical deformities. I can't tell you anything about his character, and it's just such a shame because it's such a cool idea. Again, he represents everything wrong with the Sparrow Academy. Next we have Jamie Hargreaves. She's the one that can like spit hallucinatory venom. Again, dull character, two-dimensional, can't tell you anything about her, forget about her. Next we have Pogo this season. We don't get too much Pogo this season. We learn that Pogo left Reginald Hargreaves and the Umbrella Academy because it was too fucked up for him. Super interesting idea. Again, I really like the idea of like what made this version of Pogo leave that didn't make the other version of Pogo leave. Super interesting. I like that he's a tattoo artist. I like the scene where he's holding the gun to Five under the table. Feels very Quentin Tarantino-esque in a very good way. I just think Pogo's like a cool character idea. He's excellent this season, as per usual. I like all the flashbacks we get to him, and I like all the present day scenes with him. And, you know, he's another person that would have got consumed by the Kugelblitz that we just, you know, don't really find out how anyone felt about. But whatever. Next, we have Grace Hargreaves. Grace was fucking atrocious this season. I love how Grace was portrayed in season 1. This version of Grace is just fucking around with the Kugelblitz in the basement. It's really kind of bizarre. We don't really learn why she's doing that. I know she's a robot, so maybe she's just like attracted to it, but she's just kind of like obsessed with the power of it. What wasted potential. Like there could have been so much interesting stuff with this version of Grace being around. Just totally wasted. While we're talking about the Kugelblitz in the basement and Grace, that was another awful action scene that I hated, where I think it's Victor and Lila and Sloane and someone else are like using their energy on the Kugelblitz. I don't like these scenes where it's just people standing still being like, I can't hold it, I can't contain it. Like, can we find something more interesting to do? It's just never exciting. Next we have Stanley. That's the adoptive son, I think. Yeah, Stanley is the like adoptive son that's pretending to be Lila and Diego's kid. I really like the actor. I think he was great in Euphoria. Just kind of wasted. Like, there were some cute scenes. I didn't hate it, but after a while, just felt like the show spinning its wheels, felt like a waste of time, and the way he was unceremoniously killed off and exited the show really made it just feel like padding. And this season, along with season 2, probably could have been 8 or 9 episodes rather than its full 10. This should have been cut. But yeah, look, that's everything I have to say about Umbrella Academy season 3. I know I started off really negative. There are a lot of things I like. I think a lot of character work is good this season. Season 4, by the way, looks fucking awesome. There is a trailer set to My Chemical Romance's The End, and it's sick. It's so fucking cool. Like, it's such a promising trailer. So I hope season 4 delivers on its potential. I hope season 3 was just a bit of a misstep, and season 3 could be made a lot better by how season 4 wraps up. You know, if season 4 wraps up and the point is that every single timeline needs the Umbrella Academy to die to save it, or the Umbrella Academy's existence with their energy will constantly create Kugelblitzes or apocalypses. I think that'll be a really tragic ending that will justify the fact that this show has never stuck to killing off characters or anything really of consequence, because it's constantly jumping around to different realities, timelines. I think if that's how the show ends, it's going to knock it out of the park. I also think the stuff that they're setting up in the trailer with Reginald as well as Ben will fix another bunch of problems I had with the show. So I'm actually really hoping that season 4 makes season 3 look a lot better in hindsight. Aside from that, I think the show, I genuinely think Netflix should use some of the money they made from like Dharma or something to build up the effects again. You know, go back to the computers and just fix a few of the effects, because this show looks way uglier than it has any right to. Aside from that, though, I'd probably give this season of Umbrella Academy, if the first 2 seasons were like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. So one's probably like a 6 or a 7. I don't know if that's harsh. Probably a 7. Probably a 7. Like it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But the first 2 seasons are great. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I know this was a long one. I will be talking about season 4 soon. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know what you thought of it. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about next. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely day.